Season 6, Episode 13, Criminal Ties from Underwear to Underworld. What? Trades jokes about purchasing a pair of Tradie's underwear, a discussion thread continuing from Season 5, Episode 4. Trades wonders if people's sensibilities offended by ads like this. Context matters, Sara argues. Alan probes Sara's crime connection, and she shares a few stories. Dun dun dun! Including past generation... What? This can't be right. Including past generation Mafioso bootlegging connections, FBI shootouts, and current family friends. You remember, you are listening to Why Work. Enjoy.
Welcome to the system.
Yeah. 1, 2, kid. This speed. R for D. And we're gonna bust it up like this. I'm crushing empty bourbon cans with my dirty hands, poisoned by devil's weed, dreaming off foreign lands. Ever since my very spark of life, I've been caught in this astrological plight.
Hello, and welcome to the Why Work podcast, a series of playful legal dissections on the most curious and alarming events in the world of work. The podcasters Alan Girl, Trajce and Sara debate how to craft a better experience of work. Sit back, relax and enjoy. And remember, none of the things we talk about today should be construed as legal advice or any other type of advice. We're just here to talk about all things related to work.
I'm interested to know whether you're recording.
So much interested in whether or not I'd run off to a department store and buy a pair of those undergarments. I wasn't so much interested in that. What got me thinking was, could I use that advertisement as a learning and unpack it in a workplace? And of course, notwithstanding that the Advertising Standards Authority has cleared that ad, I'd still feel nervous about bringing the content matter into the workplace or into the classroom.
Well, it depends how you do it, and you'd have to have Tradie's permission, of course, so that you didn't breach any copyright.
Oh yes,
yeah, assuming that could happen, because I would say, hey, let's go back to the judge and say, by approving this, by saying it's not in breach of any advertising standards, etc., does that also mean you would say it would be fine to view in a workplace? Now, what's your view on that, Mr. Workplace Lawyer?
It's going to depend in part how it's presented, but
context matters.
Yeah,
okay.
Context matters, and also I think it's wise to introduce, if you're going to play some footage of something that could be upsetting to some members of your audience, it's important to introduce it so that it's definitely in context. But it's an advertisement that's freely available to the public, so I think you could use it in a training session.
Ooh.
It's just the learnings, because what it does for me, it opens up the debate. It also it's really important to gauge reactions and engage whether or not people's sensibilities are offended. And I guess what I'm saying is, I wonder if more and more of it's HR engagement with what's happening in terms of perception in the real world could benefit an organisation.
I think the other thing too is there's not going to be many situations in a work environment where you would even contemplate playing some footage of someone in their underwear.
Well,
yes, there would be a Christmas party when things get all...
but that's for entertainment. No, it'd be inappropriate as entertainment. The question was put as...
Yes.
Could it be used in an educational sense?
Or just shown in the workplace for any reason, even a reflection for diversity and inclusion. Maybe that's a reflection, right?
Or to show what shouldn't be done under any circumstances.
But why shouldn't it, when it's been legislated, be okay, deemed to be okay in Australia, right? So,
and again, it depends on context. So I can remember one of the largest law firms in Brisbane having their Christmas event when they had professional performers, topless professional performers, during their Christmas event.
Was it Amsterdam?
I was really...
Trajce has been traipsing around?
Maybe he was part of the troupe. I didn't get to see them all. But I thought that was over the line. I was very surprised that they were doing that. So, but that's one of the largest law firms in Brisbane.
I'm just adding to that drink that you had.
Yeah, so I guess what I was teasing out was how far can trainers push things in order to provoke and stimulate broader discussion.
So I often do training sessions where I talk about cases where there's been a fatality, and I always introduce by saying, and including university lectures, I always introduce by saying I'm not showing any photographs of the deceased, so that they know there's no surprise.
So there's preface. And we always say, hey, if we're talking about suicide, there's a notice on our podcast episode. Like, this episode will speak about this. So you framed it. So I'm hearing you say you're framing it, and then could somebody then say, you know what, I don't want to be part of this, and exit?
They could.
Yes. Okay. So they could exit, and then
you'd have to be respectful if they did.
Yeah, allow that, and it's part of the agreement, the culture of that teaching session. And we're talking about things where you can't judge it for infinity, because it's the spirit of the times, right? How it's perceived in that spirit of the times, the zeitgeist matters with all of this, because think how many times our sensibilities have been confronted, we as a people, if you will, and then things become normalized and just sort of indoctrinated in culture, and it's no longer a thing. Or it was normalized from yesteryear, and we then would learn about how offensive that can be, and provisions come in to put constraints around that phenomenon later. So either way, it's a dimension of time that fluctuates and varies with cultural appreciation. Sorry, that's my word system hat.
No, I think you're exactly right.
I like being exactly right. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, so that ad, it's finally balanced. You've got equal representation in a binary context of two persons.
Assuming gender, right,
yeah,
sex, female only, assuming that binary.
Yeah, just in that male-female binary context. So it's not full representation, or else you'd have the entire gamut of equal representation. But just looking at the binary aspect, two persons wearing approximately the same amount of material.
Neither's dominant over the other.
And that neither's dominant over the other because, they're both dancing around. One isn't being forced to dance for the other.
You're making me think straight away. What about the LGBTQI community? Right? I love that. I love that you just said that.
Yeah, but are you watching the YouTube ads with the Budweiser ads and others? So it does exist equal representation of sponsors of models,
segments of the community.
But there was a ton of kickback from that too. So,
there's a ton of kickback.
Yes,
but just for this,
confront the sensibilities as we talked about.
I mean, just the specifics of this ad, it may just be simply, for costs, but essentially I imagine a person, irrespective of orientation, would be wearing either of that, or both, or all of those three items of clothing. So it's not so much how many people are on the screen, but I was more interested in how those persons were represented, and I got the impression they were equally or comparably represented. So this is why I don't necessarily agree with the initial complaint about the overt sexualisation, but that's in a vacuum. However, now I add to the sociological construct, to whom, as you said before though, Alan, anyone could be wearing a pair of these tradies. You could nip to the shops now and buy a pair. They sell them down the road, but you're not a tradie. So that's an important element. So I initially thought that this was only about tradies and the exploitation of potentially women in the trades, but the more I think about this broadly, this ad's okay.
We conversed this on an earlier episode when we were talking about how you don't like power tools. Sarah likes power tools, and I've got a few power tools.
I'm a wannabe.
I think I can wear tradie underwear if I want.
I'm a wannabe power tool girl.
Yes, you can wear tradie underwear too.
So in fact, the original complainant saying, the lack of representation of females, that's one dimension. As you said before, that's just one filter.
Do you guys remember those ads for United Colors of Benetton?
Yeah, Benetton.
And they used to explore all of different faces and racial mix of major cities around the world in its campaign. I used to love that.
But do you remember the patient whose partner was by his bedside, and the reason why those ads then became somewhat, I guess, confronting was the image was of the last dying minutes of an AIDS patient.
In the United Colors of Benetton?
Google it.
I don't remember that. Tell me about that. Just go on that tangent for a minute.
So where those ads started to fall out of favour was they were pushing the envelope with sort of I guess, morality at the time, but I think they went too far in some of these ads, and we'll have a look at it
But
in
don't
our
you
break.
have to go too far sometimes to get back to a middle ground? Like Madonna, right, historically has always been criticised of going too far, and then
Yes.
it's become a little more normalised later.
But here, it's like what Alan was saying. You know, he may not necessarily, he'd never show images for a lecture or a class. This was a real picture of two human beings. One was about to die for marketing, United Colours of Benetton. I sort of get the psychology of it, saying, you know, but it was really to sell.
Because the
Road.
motivation was to sell.
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful to show all phases of life, and we talked about Dias de los Muertos, the celebration of death as much
Yeah.
as life. Depends on your cultural acceptance of all things. So I find that beautiful in and of itself, right? The circle of life, right? Think of the Lion King. That song comes to mind. However, I hear you. It was for the motivation of sales.
That marketing isn't exclusively for tradespersons. That's for anyone. I could nip down the road at wherever and buy a pair of the female or the male if I chose, right? However, Alan's like
With
he's
the
trying
high
to keep it
heels,
together.
he's talked about
So,
the high heels.
Talked about the high
The
heels.
point I'm making is, so the question is this: were both of those actors represented comparably? I would say yes. And if anything, that ad speaks a lot to, generally speaking, equal representation. Even if you're going to be running around in your undies, it was an equally represented depiction.
So would you show that next week at your university?
Now, if I
What would the relevance
What's
be?
the context?
if I were teaching media, popular culture, etc., and so on.
And again, that C word in our dictionary vocabulary context, because if they were showing advertising a magic show for Las Vegas, there's often male magicians and female little assistants historically in those kinds of ads, and they might have shown a woman coming in and out or being handcuffed, right?
Yeah, cut in half with the saw.
Cut in half, like you said. That's,
That's what the ad was about,
right?
yeah.
Cutting in half, handcuffed, chained up, etc. And there's always, and she's in little decorative bikini kinds of, and feathers and something like that in the outfits, right? And that's so. Think of that image. You see that all the time, right? So I'm here for the go girl, go whoever else on stage rather than the tradition. Trajce is
All right,
betraying
come
it.
on, it's the final ruling. Are you with Tradie or not?
I'm not offended by it. I'm neutral, but I would go through a cogent design process if you're asking me, and I would understand and unpack context.
Oh, yeah,
You?
there we have it.
You?
Well, I have to respect the decision of the complaint board.
Teflon.
Yeah. All right.
Come on.
Let's break.
Welcome to the system.
Sarah, you haven't told us much about your criminal past.
No, well, I started. I've told you about my ancestry, my connections to the Mafioso with my
Yes.
great-grandmother making
Is that
pasta.
real? Is that? Are you serious about that?
Al Capone. She's a good boy, huh? Al Capone. That's seriously. He would deliver gifts. And if you don't know who Al Capone is, it's a bootlegger in America, Chicago, mafia that rattled the cages, the iron cages of law.
Oh, yeah.
as
He broke out. He
Trajce.
broke out of the cage.
He broke out. He broke the mold, right? And he would bring my great grandmother gifts, and my great uncle was an investor in the hotel where the John Dillinger shootout occurred in Wisconsin. Right, so I've got these mafia
movie.
connections here. Don't
Watch
mess
the
with
movie.
me.
It's good.
Don't-
Capone, the
Johnny
movie.
Depp's in that movie.
think
That's John
so.
Dillinger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, claim to
Yeah.
fame, right? 15
Yeah.
seconds. So then bring it closer to home. Now you're talking about motivational drivers. You're talking about unusual workplaces in this podcast. You're talking about sex as a driver. Alan and Trajce always curious about that. And my father, I need to just paint a picture. My parents are about as lovely, square, straight Midwest American as you might imagine. Okay, dad's from Wisconsin, mom's from Chicago. Mom wanted to be FBI agent or CIA. She dreamed of being CIA. She learned Russian fluently. Remember, I've told you that, right? Okay, so real, baking cookies grandma, though, never fulfilled those other career aspirations. Helped my father in his professorhood career. Straight as, right? My mom to this day still is confronted by when I was a teenager, and I'm not kidding. I have no reason not to lie about this. I had a friend's denim jacket on, and there was a joint in the denim jacket. And to this day, she still thinks, oh, sure. And she's thinking my poor daughter was being polluted and taken down. I'm like, no, I was my friend's jacket. I'm serious. It still really is. I'm in my 50s now, and I can say this. And she's so confronted, she just can't talk about it. I love you, Mom. She's always listening to you, by the way. So this is like straight parents, Midwest Americana, okay? My dad's a professor, and he was really popular with his students, and in fact his name's John, and at one point as he was older he had a walker, and one time the students actually granted him with an Australian pub crawl. So you guys know what a pub crawl is, right?
Well, I've heard about it.
Yeah, you've
No, you've never been on one?
I've never been on a pub crawl.
So for the Americans, what's a pub crawl, Alan?
You go from pub to pub, having a single drink at each pub.
A taste tester everywhere you go. So they invited him out.
More than a taste.
They included him. He won like professor or teacher of the year many times, and they included him, and he showed up. And he only went initially, but they gave him a T-shirt and it had a picture of him with a walker, and it said "Little Johnny Walker," like after Johnny Walker alcohol. Like they loved him, and he loves teaching, right? He loved teaching, and he's a researcher. So this is how straight my parents are. My parents are bridge players. So every holiday that I had in America was always decorated or punctuated by a bridge game, and then we'd travel, right? My brother and I would be in the swimming pool, and they'd be going to bridge tournaments. Now, how does this link to our podcast, right? And work. So I was like 18 or 19, and my father is visiting. I was in Australia at the time, and in Adelaide, and my father calls and says, "Hey, Sarah, can you collect me?" Or I connect with him. He said, "Can you collect me?" And I'm like, "Sure." You know, he was just visiting. He must have been living in the U.S. at the time. "Where are you?" "Oh, I'm playing bridge with Bill Nash." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. So you want me to collect you from the bridge club?" He's like, No. I'm at Bill's work." I'm like, "Oh, Dad, like Bill has always been really nice to me, but you can now Google Bill's name, and I have his expressed permission to speak about him freely. He's been always lovely, very, very friendly to me, very generous man." Bill Nash,
Googling right now.
yeah, owns most of the sex stores across South Australia. And so when my dad says his workplace, I have to go. This is a little, I must have been anywhere from 18 to 22, whatever was legal to walk into sex stores, right? I can't remember what it was then. So I have to go there's billiards halls down the table, Adelaide's largest sex store, and go upstairs through accoutrements. I walk in, "Hi, hello, I'm just looking for my dad. I go collect my father." Wade through and navigate the labyrinth of accoutrements and find my father in the back room, nerdily playing bridge with Bill Nash in the small office, right? and they're just like, it's so normalized, right? Because this is Bill's workplace, right? Yeah. So it's like, "Hey, come on in. Hey, do you want something?" "No, I'm good, thanks. Would you like some wine?" He has like collections of very expensive wine because he does big business with some notorious folks. You're going to read about him. Trajce is shaking his head because he's certainly known for crimes and commission, okay, right? And, yep. So look at Trajce's eyes.
It was this century.
It's century. I spoke to him recently, and he's lovely. So this is the thing. I'm like, the hypocrisy. I'm teasing my mom, going, "Okay, so you get on my case about somebody else's joint in a jacket I borrowed." And you're all hanging out, having dinners, going out to dinners. They went to his 80th birthday party, right? I go, "Mom, you know the FBI is probably following me right now, watching who's coming in and out of this birthday party, because this is a family of notoriety." When my father says, "Oh, hey, Bill, are you worried about all these other sex shops opening up? I see them on the other corners every time I come to Australia." And Bill's like, "No, mate, that's my friend, that's my sister, that's my cousin. I set them all up in business. I help them." It's like, what? And they met at the bridge club, and Bill's an avid bridge player, right? And there was a period of time where he was in prison and he had to pay some dues, dear Bill. And my dad would teach bridge in the prisons. And he was dedicated to helping prisoners learn bridge.
Right.
So my dad is like always, he's got this logic brain, he's working 7 problems, he's playing bridge every year, he's got like 5 things happening at any given time, and this bridge left logic engineering brain is always going, right? And
Okay, so Nash's workplace, where are you going with that?
The sex store. So I said to him, okay, I told him about this podcast, and I explained that we have episodes that talk about the confrontations, workplace law, in things like brothels. And he's like, yeah, well, it's a workplace, and we get no protections. There's a taboo. He goes, he got into selling accoutrements, sexual aids, in the sex stores, because there was money to be made in it. And he got into it like, is it the 80s, 70s? I don't know when he got into it, but he got into it early, and he set up quite a strong monopoly. He did incredibly well. One time when I was, this time I was definitely about 18, and I was on my way to university, and I was waitressing in a Thai restaurant in Adelaide, and they called me off shift, right? It was too quiet. I went out for the night. I went to the casino or something with friends, and I found out later, we didn't have cell phones in those days, and he tried to call my house to find me. The restaurant tried to call me. Why? Because Bill Nash came to the restaurant, probably with several, shall we say, companions that may be on hire, okay? And often would go out with my parents with several companions on hire, and asked for me, said, hey, I'm here to have a restaurant. And there were politicians in this meeting at the same time, this restaurant dinner tonight, politicians, folks on hire, and says, Sara, is Sara here? So they're madly trying to call because he's asked for me, and he's got his big group coming into the restaurant. They couldn't get a hold of me. I find out later they had to borrow the waitress from the restaurant upstairs in a Japanese restaurant, came downstairs to help out with the demand. He gave her like a $500 tip, and he didn't even know her. I'm like, oh, come on. So
The one time.
That's why I'm a struggling student.
Oh.
But as the minute I said that we've been talking about workplace law in brothels or in any workplace, because you have said to me the law knows no boundaries of workplace.
And it surprises me to hear that he said that, but he's probably thinking about the law as it existed in the 70s or 80s.
But even now, it seems confronting when things are being tested, right? We have to say, but hang on, this is a workplace. Let's just recognize it's a workplace.
It is confronting, but that's not a problem with the law. That's how people perceive the law.
Yes.
What about, and how people perceive the law?
Morality is such a strong player in this. So whilst the law's supposed to not factor in moral attitudes and beliefs inherently, it does.
We're social, political animals, right?
I mean, I'm reflecting back now on Cougar Town.
Yes.
In any other place, that just would have been a biffo, like I said, a work site, 2 tradies going, knock for knock, hammer and tongs.
Silly legal structures that are very difficult to set
correct.
up and very difficult to maintain.
So here we've got 2 workers fighting over a client with stilettos, but it wouldn't be seen through the same lens as, say, a work site involving 2, I don't know, subcontractors fighting about you've stolen my handgun or something.
And what about the judgments around it? Because we've talked about how the award, even though you can't compare apples with oranges, right? But the awards are so low for a woman in that trade,
Well, the pay
a prostitution
very
trade.
low in the judgment.
The pay, and there might be some moral judgment on the worth of this person, right? On the worth of this person or the issue because of the nature of their work, as opposed to some of the men we've talked about.
It's
right?
probably not so much more about moral justice, probably because there's just no precedent to compare, because these cases don't go through the courts. So it's difficult for those decision makers to actually gauge, first of all, the nature of the work, and B, what's the appropriate, if it's a common law matter, what's the appropriate sort of payout. Yeah, they are tough, and that's because of morality. That's a tough one.
And I remember reading recently in Australia some women who either work in or manage brothels, that they are not able to get loans, for example, and they're judged, and they're having to operate and mostly deal in cash when cashless systems are needed, and so their financial laws around their work are influenced by that social political morality force.
That's right. It's interesting. I wonder whether this conversation will be more, I guess, more widely accepted, and there'll be more understanding around it once we get through the fans only cases, because more and more, because that's digitized now. There is a print. You know precisely how many fans you have. You have to declare the income. I wonder if there will be more structure around this topic in years to come through technology. Those fans only, is it fans only?
Only fans, I think it's called.
OnlyFans. It's a website specifically for you to do whatever you wish. It can be sexual in nature or not, but your fans. So you pay a subscription. So
to
these
watch
people have
this person live in video, right?
Yeah, and you then create content. For example, if a specific fan, so a client, a customer, call them what you will, wants a specific service, the digital footprint is there. So you know precisely, if you're audited, for example, the ATO could audit and go, right, so you've had X amount of traffic,
clickbait,
X amount of fans, show us your income. So I wonder if there'll be more more comfortable conversation around this as more and more OnlyFans.
We've talked about teachers, right? Here we go, right? There are cases where teachers have a day job, and at night they're an OnlyFans content manager.
Yeah.
They
Not just teachers, other professions.
But as an example, right?
So on SBS, I think, what's the on the digital platform on SBS, content creators, many chose no longer to do the day job, and even had a lawyer explain the employment law aspects. But there was one particular person who was a student studying biomedicine, who has every intention of becoming a medical practitioner, who happens to earn a lot of money on her OnlyFans website. So I think the more and more, because this is all around work, the more and more of these shows are aired, I think the greater audience get an understanding that these are vexed issues, because they're stooped in morality. And it was fascinating. It's on SBS. I'll find out what it was, but it was a good insight for me to understand what this fans are. And also those people, mainly, look, the ratio was mainly female content creators, workers, and male consumers, but that's just an observation I made. But I didn't see too many male. But however,
you have to study that, right? That's part of your media, social media.
Yeah, but reliably informed, both men and women or any of any orientation are content creators, and they're legitimately making, well, they have to, because the first thing that's going to be asked is, what's your traffic? How many subscriptions did you have? And of course, everything's online too. There's no cash being exchanged.
Well, I can say really clearly, though, from this learning, that another example of ontological framework, with loving kindness and due respect to my amazing mom, her ontological framework is food. Bill likes her food. She loves Bill. That's all there needs to be. Morality, no other question. Wow. It's all of food.
Interesting.
Right? Have a good bridge and food.
What sort of food was it?
Italian, probably.
My mom cooks everything. She's a dynamite cook. She has recipes that will fill the walls and the halls here. And so anything we do in life, anything, past, future, right? It's anchored around food. Past, I'll say, Mom, remember when we were in Las Vegas and for such and such event, this conference? Yes, honey, you had the linguine.
She remembers.
What? How do you know that? And you had this, and the sauce was this. I'm like, are you serious? Everything. She can tell you what's for dinner 2 Thursdays from, the next week.
That's such a Chicago accent.
Yeah,
You did that well.
So anyway, I love it. And
Chicago,
Bill,
right?
I just want to thank you for letting us speak freely. You gave me permission to speak about it. We've had great conversations, and he's just passionate about bridge. And as I'm saying, he was playing bridge in the back office, and all the rest was just traffic, and it's just
we
his
thank
business.
the FBI for listening in.
That's right. But not the KGB.
They're about to follow me now.
But look, if there's anything that our listeners might get out of this is, we three will boldly go where no other podcasters go in the workplace arena. And that's our point of difference. Boom, boom.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Why Work. You've been listening to Trajce, Sara and Alan. And if you'd like to know more about some of the things we've talked about today, please subscribe, and we'd be more than happy to provide you with information, names of cases, and other things that may interest you. Please be aware that none of the matters we've talked about today should be construed as legal advice or any other type of advice. We're just here to talk about all things related to work. See you next time.
What you thinking? You jumped up in the system. Welcome to the system. Welcome to the system. Welcome to the system. Yeah. Welcome to the system.